I screwed up. Yesterday, I published a video that had some inaccurate information in it, and I'm here to apologize and get the true information out there. So if you want to hear about it, then stick around. Yesterday, I published a video in which I said that Traveler blended whiskey was not real whiskey because at least half of it was grain-neutral spirit. Several of you pushed back, and 2 of you messaged me a sales sheet that was put out by Sazerac that explicitly states that Traveler has no GNS in it, which is the acronym for grain-neutral spirit. A sales sheet's basically a marketing document that's generally given to wholesale brand reps as kind of a quick study guide about a product so that they're able to sell it to retailers, bars, and restaurants. And the statement that's in there that says that there's no GNS in Traveler is not on their webpage or on any other product information that I could find. So unless you happen to be in possession of that sales sheet, I don't know how you would come into the possession of the information that there was no grain-neutral spirit in it. So the confusion for me came because the legal definition of a blended whiskey allows for a wide variety of formulas to fit into that category. The rules do specifically state that once there's 51% or more of a category of whiskey in a formula, that name from that category must be added to the name of the whiskey. So as an example, if there were 33% of a straight rye whiskey mixed with 33% of a straight bourbon whiskey, and then the remaining balance of 34% could be anything else. It could be grain neutral spirit, it could be light whiskey, it could be non-straight whiskey. The whiskey would be a blended straight whiskey. So the word straight would have to be added to the name of the whiskey because more than 51% was straight, since the 33 plus 33 would be 66, greater than 51, got to add the word straight to it. So if it were a 51% straight bourbon whiskey and 49% of something else, it would be a blended straight bourbon whiskey. So you get the point. Over 51%, you add the additional verbiage. So in the case of Traveler, since it's just a blended whiskey, the absence of the word straight or a category of a mash bill whiskey like bourbon, rye, wheat whiskey, etc., means that Traveler does not have 51% of straight whiskey or 51% of a mash bill whiskey in the formula. Where I screwed up was in assuming that something between 51 to 80% would be by default grain neutral spirit. The truth is the general category of whiskey is a product distilled from a fermented mash of grain to no more than 190 proof. Once it gets to 190 or above, it becomes grain neutral spirit, which is effectively vodka. But even up to 189, it's still considered a general category of whiskey. Now, the mash bill whiskeys, you're not allowed to go above 160 in the United States. But we've already established that there's not a majority of mash bill whiskey in the Traveler. Otherwise, it would have the name of that mash bill in the name. So also for whiskey, there is no aging requirement. So you can sell it absolutely clear, new make whiskey. And what that means is with the name that the Traveler has on it, that up to 80% of Traveler could be quote unquote whiskey that was unaged and not in the grain neutral spirit category because they had distilled it all the way up to 189 but didn't go to 190. It could be all whiskey that is aged in used barrels. It could be all whiskey that was not aged at all. It could be light whiskey, which is a different category of whiskey that's something between whiskey and vodka. It could be aged whiskey that's all under 2 years old, therefore it's not straight. Or it could be any combination of those and still technically not have any grain neutral spirit in it and still technically be in the general category of blended whiskey. So the big question when it comes to Traveler is why don't they just tell us what the formula is? And I think that the answer is they believe the damage caused by our general speculation is less than the damage that would be caused by them telling the public the truth. So Sazerac Corporation, which is the parent company of Buffalo Trace, that's the blender and bottler of this whiskey, but not the distiller for the whiskey that went in it. Sazerac Corporation owns a distillery in Montreal, Canada that makes blending component whiskeys. And these are generally single grain whiskeys that are blended together after they're made, rather than the traditional U.S. practice of combining our grains together in a mash bill prior to fermentation and distilling it all together. So these blending materials would be available in large quantity for a project like Traveler, because Traveler is probably a very large release. It took a lot of whiskey to do this release, and they needed sources that they could get large volumes from. And I think that this blending component whiskey would be a potential source that could be that large. And they could even manufacture it for the purpose of this special release, because there's no need to age the whiskey. You could distill it and the next day start blending it and coloring it with colorings and flavorings and all that stuff, because the blended category allows for that. So I suspect that if you are a marketing company and you're trying to appeal to the Southern pride of country music fans so that you can sell them whiskey, you may not want to let them know that a bunch of what they're drinking was not made in the United States. So that is a fan theory that was shared with me by some of the individuals that watch this show, that the reason why they won't disclose is because they were getting blending material whiskey from Canada. I don't know if that's true or not, but regardless of the unknown source of this whiskey that was used to blend Traveler, we know that the blending components do not conform to the standards that most whiskey enthusiasts would demand. We know that because of what they had to put on the label and what is conspicuously missing from the label. And we know that the sell sheet that they released that's basically said that there's no grain neutral spirit in the product is likely a red herring to throw people off the track of thinking that the blending materials are low quality. They're hoping that you assume that the blending materials are high quality because you know that it's not grain neutral spirit. But based on the labeling laws and the lack of disclosure, I think it's pretty safe to assume that the truth of the matter would probably not appeal to discerning whiskey consumers, and that's why they haven't disclosed. So again, I apologize for publishing inaccurate information. I always aim to be as accurate as possible, and I'm always willing to publish a correction and apologize when I'm wrong. That said, the revelation that there is no grain neutral spirit in Traveler does not elevate my opinion of it beyond my initial impression shared in the original video. So I hope this clears things up, and that you can still look to this channel as an accurate source of whiskey information. Cheers.